Energy, in this symbolic frame, is not force and it is not belief. It is momentum that begins moving before language arrives. When the narrative speaks of Egyptian gods reawakening, it is not invoking deities as beings, but as functions, ancient representations of order, motion, judgment, creation, and consequence. Those archetypes were never asleep. They were dormant because conditions did not require them to surface. You did not awaken anything by intention. You altered the conditions under which inertia could no longer persist. In systems built on delay, avoidance, or ritualized stillness, the presence of alignment acts like a switch. Not dramatic, not loud, but irreversible. When alignment enters, stagnation becomes uncomfortable. Action becomes the path of least resistance. This is why your energy forces others into motion without command. You do not push. You do not persuade. You do not instruct. You simply remove the comfort of remaining misaligned. What ancient cultures symbolized as gods rising was this exact moment, when internal imbalance reached a threshold and movement became unavoidable. The statues did not move. People did. You may have noticed this pattern repeatedly. People near you suddenly make decisions they had postponed. Conversations they avoided begin. Projects restart. Conflicts surface. Not because you provoked them, but because your presence collapses the space where delay could hide. Delay survives on ambiguity. Your energy reduces ambiguity by being internally resolved. In Egyptian symbolism, gods were not worshipped for mercy. They were revered for function. Ma'at represented balance. Anubis represented consequence. Ra represented continuity. When balance enters a space, imbalance reacts. When consequence becomes visible, avoidance dissolves. When continuity is restored, fragmentation loses appeal. These are not myth. They are descriptions of systemic behavior. Your energy does not demand action. It makes inaction costly. That distinction matters. Coercion creates resistance. Alignment creates motion. The people who feel forced are not being pushed by you. They are being pulled forward by their own unresolved tension, now unable to remain dormant in your proximity. This is why reactions to you are polarized. Some move quickly. Some withdraw. Some become agitated. Some become focused. All responses are forms of action. Neutrality disappears. Stagnant systems do not tolerate clarity. They either reorganize or distance themselves. Both outcomes confirm the same thing. The system has been activated. The phrase reawakened the Egyptian gods is a symbolic way of saying this. Ancient internal mechanisms resumed operation. Accountability, direction, purpose, momentum. These mechanisms never respond to word. They respond to presence. When presence is coherent, dormant structures resume their role. You are not seen as authority in these moments. Authority would invite challenge. You are experienced as inevitability. Inevitability does not argue. It simply advances. People do not debate inevitability. They adjust to it. That adjustment often looks like sudden courage, urgency, or discomfort, but it is movement either way. This is not mysticism. It is mechanics expressed through myth. Ancient civilizations encoded system truths into gods because language was insufficient. You are encountering the same truths now, but in modern spaces that forgot how to name them. The effect remains even if the symbols changed. This first layer establishes the core reality. Your energy does not awaken beings. It awakens motion where delay had settled. Action emerges when internal contradictions can no longer coexist. What you carry into a space accelerates that moment. Not by pressure, but by resolution. When something resolved enters an unresolved system, tension redistributes. People feel it as restlessness, urgency, or a sudden need to decide. They often misattribute this feeling to stress or external timing, but it is neither. It is alignment encountering delay and exposing the cost of maintaining it. In ancient Egyptian symbolism, gods did not intervene randomly. They activated when balance was disrupted beyond tolerance. That activation was never gentle. It was corrective. When the narrative says you reawakened them, it is describing how corrective forces resume their function when stagnation becomes unsustainable. You do not summon correction. You remove the conditions that allowed avoidance to persist. This is why people around you begin moving without understanding why. They start conversations they have postponed. They confront realities they have kept symbolic and distant. They make choices they claimed they were not ready for. Your energy compresses time, not by speeding it up, but by removing the padding that made delay feel safe. What remains is the decision itself, exposed and unavoidable. You may notice that this does not always produce gratitude. Movement is not always comfortable. When delay has protected someone from consequence, clarity feels threatening. They may describe your presence as intense, disruptive, or demanding, even when you said nothing. This reaction is not about you. It is about the friction between who they are and what they have avoided becoming. The ancient archetypes encoded this truth clearly. Stagnation invites disorder. Disorder demands correction. Correction manifests as action. These were not moral judgments. They were mechanical observations. You are not judging anyone into motion. You are revealing the imbalance that was already there by standing in internal balance yourself. This is why your energy does not inspire passivity. Inspiration can be admired from a distance. Alignment cannot. Alignment demands response. People either move toward coherence or move away from it. Remaining still is no longer an option. That is why neutrality collapses around you. Systems polarized by clarity cannot remain ambiguous. You may also notice that this effect is temporary. Once movement begins, once decisions are made, conversations had, paths chosen, the intensity fades. The gods return to dormancy because their function is complete. Motion has resumed. Balance is restored, at least for now. This confirms that the effect was conditional, not personal. Importantly, this activation does not depend on your intention. You cannot turn it on or off. Trying to would convert it into performance. Performance dulls the edge. The moment you seek outcome, the energy changes character. You remain effective because you do not seek reaction. Reaction arrives on its own when conditions require it. This layer clarifies something critical. You are not a catalyst by choice. You are a catalyst by state. Catalysts do not decide when reactions occur. They simply lower the threshold. When the threshold is crossed, reaction follows naturally. No force, no persuasion, just chemistry reasserting itself. The Egyptian myths described this as divine awakening because the language of the time could not describe systems re-entering motion after prolonged dormancy. You are witnessing the same phenomenon now in modern form. Titles changed. Symbols changed. Mechanics did not. Your energy forces action not because it is aggressive, but because it is complete. Completeness exposes incompleteness around it. Incompleteness must respond. That response is action, whether welcomed or resisted. This is the second layer. You do not initiate movement. You make continued stillness impossible. When motion resumes around you, it is rarely coordinated. It appears fragmented, uneven, sometimes chaotic. This is expected. Dormant systems do not restart smoothly. They lurch before they stabilize. What you witness as scattered action is actually recalibration in progress. Ancient myth described this phase as gods clashing, weighing hearts, passing judgment. In structural terms, it is simply misaligned parts adjusting to a new equilibrium. Your energy does not organize this process. It initiates exposure. Once exposure happens, each person's internal structure responds according to its own integrity. Those already near alignment move cleanly. Those deeply conflicted react sharply. Those dependent on delay resist or withdraw. All of this is movement. Even resistance is motion when stagnation was the default. This is why people often misread your effect as pressure. Pressure implies an external force applied deliberately. What happens near you is internal compression. When ambiguity collapses, people feel cornered by their own unresolved choices. They may project that sensation outward because internal accountability is uncomfortable. You become the nearest reference point, even though you did nothing to create the tension. Egyptian symbolism framed this as judgment because judgment was the only language available to describe inevitability. The scales did not punish. They revealed weight. Hearts were not condemned. They were measured. The feather did not accuse. It remained still. That stillness is the key. You are the still point against which others feel their imbalance. Measurement requires a fixed reference. You provide that reference without effort. You may notice that after these encounters, people often say things like, "I don't know why, but I had to act," or "something just shifted." They rarely mention you directly. That absence is important. If they attributed the movement to you, they could externalize responsibility again. By keeping the cause vague, the action remains owned internally. That ownership makes the change more durable. This layer also explains why your energy does not produce uniform outcomes. Some people improve their lives. Some make drastic changes that later collapse. Some exit entirely. Your role is not to ensure success. It is to ensure movement resumes. Outcome depends on the quality of what was already there. Catalysts do not choose result. They reveal readiness. You may feel a subtle fatigue after these moments, not because you expended energy, but because coherence in misaligned environments requires containment. You do not absorb others' turmoil, but you hold steady while it passes. That steadiness has a cost. Not depletion, but density. You often need quiet afterward, not to recover, but to let the system finish adjusting without interference. Ancient cultures ritualized this phase because they understood its volatility. They created ceremonies to contain the transition from stillness to motion. Modern environments lack those containers. The result is that the adjustment happens informally, through people like you, in unmarked rooms without language to explain it. The myth remains accurate even when the ritual is gone. You're not here by chance. Feel the pull? Tap join to unlock truth, purpose, and a tribe that gets it. This is more than a membership, it's your calling. This is why your energy does not scale easily. Large crowds diffuse responsibility. The effect weakens when accountability spreads too thin. Your presence works best in contained systems. Teams, rooms, conversations, where individual inertia can no longer hide behind group ambiguity. That containment mirrors the ancient temple, a bounded space where imbalance could not escape notice. The third layer reveals a difficult truth. Action is not inherently good. It is simply preferable to stagnation. Movement creates the possibility of correction. Stillness preserves error. You are not bringing salvation or chaos. You are restoring the possibility of consequence. Consequence is what allows systems to learn. This is why the language of gods persists, not because of belief, but because inevitability feels larger than choice when it arrives. People experience their own decisions as if compelled because they delayed them too long. When the threshold is crossed, the choice feels forced. In reality, it is simply overdue. You do not witness the end of this process. You leave before resolution. That is intentional. Remaining would create dependency. Dependency would shift responsibility back onto you. You exit while movement is underway so ownership stays where it belongs. This layer completes the understanding that your energy does not guide action. It restores the conditions under which action can no longer be avoided. What follows activation is always responsibility, even when no one names it as such. Once movement begins, systems can no longer pretend that delay was neutral. Something has shifted, and with that shift comes exposure. Choices become visible. Avoidance loses its camouflage. This is the phase ancient cultures encoded as divine order asserting itself, not as punishment but as sequence returning. Cause reconnects with effect. Your energy does not manage this phase. It does not correct outcomes or soften consequences. It simply refuses to interfere. That refusal is essential. Interference would reintroduce distortion. Distortion would allow people to externalize what is now internal. By remaining present but non-directive, you allow responsibility to land where it belongs. This is why people feel compelled to act for themselves, not for you. In Egyptian symbolism, this stage was represented by gods who did not speak often. They weighed, observed, and allowed. Silence was not absence. It was authority expressed through restraint. You mirror this pattern naturally. When movement accelerates around you, you do not rush to guide it. Guidance would dilute ownership. You remain still enough for others to feel the weight of their own momentum. You may notice that during this phase, people often seek validation and do not receive it. They look for confirmation that their action is correct, necessary, or justified. You do not provide that confirmation unless alignment is clear. This is not indifference. It is precision. Premature reassurance would interrupt learning. Systems only recalibrate when feedback is honest. Silence, in this context, is honest. This is where your energy is often misunderstood as cold or distant. In reality, it is exact. Warmth would blur edges. Blurred edges would allow people to retreat back into ambiguity. You hold clarity without dramatizing it. That clarity keeps movement going until it stabilizes on its own terms. Stabilization achieved internally lasts longer than stability imposed externally. Blessed by His grace? Click Super Thank You and give $20 to spread His light. Your gift plants seeds that grow His kingdom. Be the blessing. Ancient myths describe this phase as judgment because judgment felt inescapable once motion resumed. But judgment was never about condemnation. It was about measurement. Measurement requires a fixed reference. You remain that reference by not shifting in response to others' reactions. Their urgency does not accelerate you. Their discomfort does not soften you. That consistency is what allows accurate measurement to occur. You may also feel the urge to withdraw slightly at this stage, not to avoid involvement but to prevent attachment. Attachment would create obligation. Obligation would entangle you in outcomes that are not yours to own. By stepping back at the right moment, you ensure that action completes its cycle without dependency forming. This timing is intuitive for you. You leave while momentum exists, not after it dissipates. This phase clarifies why your presence is often brief but consequential. You do not stay to witness result. Results invite commentary. Commentary invites narrative. Narrative invites distortion. You exit before interpretation begins. What remains is action unfolding without your imprint. That is the cleanest form of influence. Influence without trace. The archetypal gods return to dormancy here because their function has been fulfilled. Balance does not need enforcement once restored. Motion does not need provocation once resumed. Systems continue forward under their own weight. Your energy recedes because it is no longer required. You do not cling to relevance. Relevance would distort the cycle. This layer confirms something subtle but important. Your role is temporary by design. Permanence would create hierarchy. Hierarchy would invite resistance. You appear, conditions shift, motion resumes, and you withdraw. That rhythm preserves autonomy on all sides. No one owes you anything. No one follows you. No one blames you. The system simply continues, altered. In this sense, the myth of God's awakening and returning to sleep is precise. They were never rulers. They were regulators. They appeared only when imbalance demanded response. You function the same way, not as a figure to be revered, but as a condition that cannot be ignored when present. This is the fourth layer. Your energy does not stay to govern. It activates responsibility, then steps aside. Once responsibility has landed, a different tension appears. It is quieter, heavier, and more personal. This is the moment when action is no longer driven by urgency, but by consequence. People realize they cannot undo the movement that began. They must now carry it. Ancient myths described this as God's withdrawing while order remained, because the weight of choice had shifted fully onto human hands. What was awakened does not stay to assist. It stays as structure. Your energy does not participate in this phase actively, but it is still present as reference. Not as pressure, not as reminder, but as contrast. People sense the difference between acting from impulse and acting from alignment because they have felt both in proximity to you. That memory becomes internal. They no longer need you nearby to feel it. In fact, your continued presence would interfere. This is why you often feel naturally compelled to step back once movement stabilizes. You may notice that after this point, people rarely return to discuss what happened. Not because it was insignificant, but because it has become theirs. Ownership has fully transferred. Talking it through with you would dilute that ownership. They may reference the situation indirectly or not at all. This silence is not avoidance. It is integration. What has been integrated no longer needs external processing. In Egyptian symbolism, this stage was associated with order being restored, not celebrated. Order was not an achievement. It was the default state when imbalance was corrected. Celebration would imply rarity. Order was expected. The same applies here. When people finally act on what they have delayed, the relief they feel is quiet. Loud relief would signal dependence. Quiet relief signals internal realignment. This is also where you begin to feel less visible to those you activated. Visibility would suggest ongoing influence. Ongoing influence would undermine autonomy. You fade from their immediate awareness because you are no longer required. That fading is not loss of impact. It is proof that the impact succeeded. Systems that require constant input never truly changed. Systems that continue without you did. You may sense a subtle shift in how you experience these encounters. Earlier, there was intensity. Now, there is neutrality. You are no longer bracing for reaction or adjustment. You are simply present until presence is no longer needed. This neutrality protects you from attachment. Attachment would blur the boundary between catalyst and controller. You remain neither. This phase also reveals why your energy does not accumulate authority over time. Authority would imply continuity of command. What you generate is episodic activation. Each situation reset. No hierarchy forms. No expectation builds. This prevents you from being positioned as source or solution. Solutions belong to the system itself once motion resumes. Ancient cultures feared this phase because it removed excuses. Once the gods withdrew, there was no one left to blame or appease. The same discomfort exists now. People sometimes distance themselves from you afterward, not out of resentment, but out of self-protection. Being near you makes delay difficult. Once they have acted, they may need space to adjust without further stimulation. You allow that space without taking it personally. You may also notice that environments change subtly after these cycles repeat. Not because you stayed, but because the memory of alignment lingers. Systems become slightly less tolerant of stagnation. Decisions happen earlier. Avoidance shortens. You did not train this. You simply revealed what motion felt like once. That reference remains. This is the fifth layer of the pattern. Your energy does not follow action forward. It hands action back to the system and disappears. There is no recognition attached to this disappearance. Recognition would reinsert you into the story. The absence of story is what allows the correction to hold. Ancient myths understood this. That is why the gods returned to silence once order resumed. You move on not because the work is done, but because the work is no longer yours. After disappearance comes recalibration, and this is where the pattern becomes most misunderstood. From the outside, it looks like nothing continues. From the inside, everything does. What was set into motion begins to reorganize daily behavior, priorities, and tolerance levels. People no longer need a trigger. The trigger has already passed. What remains is consequence unfolding at a human pace. Your energy is no longer active here in any visible sense, but its absence is doing important work. Without you present, there is no external reference point left, no catalyst to lean on, no pressure to react against. The system must now self-regulate. This is where real change either stabilizes or collapses. You are not involved in that outcome, and that distance is intentional. Ancient Egyptian symbolism framed this phase as the world continuing after divine withdrawal. Crops still grew. Time still moved. Judgment had already occurred, not as punishment, but as alignment restored. What followed was ordinary life under corrected conditions. That ordinariness is the proof. When change becomes ordinary, it has succeeded. You may notice that people who once reacted strongly to you now seem neutral, even distant. This is not rejection. It is completion. Strong reactions only occur while imbalance is exposed. Once action has been taken and responsibility accepted, the emotional charge dissipates. You no longer represent anything urgent to them, and that is exactly as it should be. This is also the phase where you yourself feel least connected to the earlier intensity. You are not replaying conversations. You are not tracking outcomes. You are not wondering if the activation worked. That question never arises because it was never your role. Your role ended the moment motion resumed. Remaining mentally involved would create residue. You allow none. There is a subtle discipline required here. Resisting the urge to interpret aftermath. Interpretation would create narrative. Narrative would assign meaning retroactively. Retroactive meaning distorts sequence. You let events remain as event. Whatever people became afterward belongs to them alone. You do not integrate their outcomes into your identity or sense of purpose. This is why your energy does not accumulate karma, credit, or blame. Accumulation would imply continuity of influence. Influence has already ended. What persists is structure, not connection. Structure does not remember who restored it. It simply holds until disturbed again. That anonymity is essential. You may also observe that new environments do not feel heavier after repeated cycles. There is no burnout, no depletion. That is because nothing is being spent. Catalysts are not fuel. They are conditions. Conditions do not exhaust themselves through use. They simply exist when present and withdraw when not required. This layer clarifies something crucial. You are not here to improve systems permanently. Permanence would require control. Control would reintroduce imbalance. You are here to reintroduce movement when movement has stalled too long. What happens after movement begins is not yours to manage. Ancient myths warned against gods overstaying. When divine figures lingered, humans deferred responsibility indefinitely. The same principle applies now. Your instinct to leave once action begins is not avoidance. It is correctness. Staying would weaken the lesson by softening consequence. This sixth layer reveals the restraint beneath your effect. The true force is not activation, but withdrawal at the correct moment. That withdrawal allows ownership to fully transfer. Without transfer, no system truly learns. Your energy does not stay to witness growth. It trusts growth to continue without supervision. When the cycle fully completes, nothing announces resolution. There is no closing moment, no recognition that something ancient was activated and released. Life continues in its ordinary rhythm, and that ordinariness is the final confirmation that the process worked. Systems that have truly returned to motion do not commemorate the trigger. They absorb it and move forward without reference. At this stage, your energy is no longer perceived as disruptive, activating, or intense. It becomes neutral again. This neutrality is not absence. It is balance restored. What once felt like pressure now feels like baseline. People do not think of you when they act, and that is essential. If they did, responsibility would leak outward again. Instead, decisions now arise from within them, as if they had always been capable of movement on their own. This is where the symbolism of ancient gods finally dissolved. Gods were never meant to remain awake. They represented forces that intervened only when imbalance reached a critical threshold. Once balance returned, their presence would have been intrusive. In the same way, your energy was never meant to persist as stimulus. It existed to interrupt dormancy, not to become a permanent influence. You may notice that even your own memory of these moments fades quickly. There is no urge to preserve them, no desire to revisit or analyze. Analysis would imply unfinished business. The lack of it signals closure. What happened did not need interpretation. It functioned exactly as intended and then released itself. This is also where a quiet confidence settles, not in power, but in correct timing. You trust now, more than before, that movement will occur when conditions are right, with or without your awareness. You no longer anticipate reaction. You no longer brace for impact. You enter spaces, remain as you are, and leave when it is time, without tracking effect. That trust is not indifference. It is alignment matured. Importantly, this cycle does not elevate you above others. It does not make you central, chosen, or singular in value. It clarifies function, not status. You are one of the points through which motion resumes when delay has accumulated too long. Other points exist. Other conditions arise. You are not unique in existence, only specific in configuration. This understanding removes pressure from identity. You do not need to protect your energy, explain it, or refine it. Protection would suggest fragility. Explanation would suggest doubt. Refinement would suggest insufficiency. None apply. The energy operates precisely because it is unclaimed and uninterpreted. What remains after the gods return to dormancy is not emptiness. It is continuity. Life resumes with slightly more honesty, slightly less delay, slightly clearer consequence. These shifts may fade over time, but the memory of alignment remains as a reference point inside those who experienced it. That reference does not point to you. It points to possibility. You move forward unchanged because there is nothing to integrate. You were not transformed by the cycle. You were simply present while it occurred. Presence does not accumulate residue when it is not attached to outcome. You continue as before, steady, coherent, unmarked. The narrative ends here because there is nothing left to activate. Any further emphasis would turn function into mythology again. Myth was useful when language was limited. Now clarity is enough. Silence preserves it better than continuation. Your energy does not awaken gods. It awakens motion where stillness overstayed. Once motion returns, it withdraws without trace. And life goes on, not louder, not grander, but moving again,